Good afternoon, everybody. You're very welcome to the backyard at Lonergan, supported by Bank of Ireland. I'm Sharon Noonan, and I'm delighted to be hosting this session, which is called Family Matters, Tradition Meets Tomorrow. And I remember last year, after I left Lonergan, getting in touch with Fallon to say, look, I really would love to do something that focuses on families and family businesses, because I come from a family business myself. I'm not working in it because I was never directed towards it. I'd say because my father knew I'd be absolutely rubbish in it. He had greengrocer shops, and anytime they wanted anybody to leave, they brought me in for a day, and I seemed to have a natural way of really annoying them, and then they just left, and then I was let go again at the same time. So the panellists today we have two brothers from the North Antrim coast, which is actually really close to where I'm from originally. So we have at the end Marino, not Marina, that's the Irish version of it, Marino and Arnaldo Morelli from Morelli's Ice Cream, who last year their mango sorbet won the Supreme Champion accolade, and they've already picked up a number of awards this morning. And then we have the Lonergans, father and son team, Ed and Eamonn, and they're from Knockanore Farmhouse cheese over in Waterford. So a great geographic spread. And before I start to talk to the panellists, I just want to see a show of hands. How many people here in the room are working in a family business? Yeah, there's so many of you, and I know from coming from a family business that there's great challenges there, but there's also great joy to come from working with family members most of the time. So in terms of first generation, second generation, how many of you are second or third or more generation in the family business? Okay, so just a few. So a lot of you are first generation in your family businesses, and succession planning is something that you're probably quite concerned about. Like you're working in this business either to hand it down to another family member, or maybe to upscale and sell it on for a zillion euros, like who knows. So to come to the two Morelli brothers then, your family business started way back in 1911. So, Marino, do you want to start off and just tell everybody the story about Morelli Ice Cream?
Well, it started with my great uncle, who actually walked from Italy to Paris, and he ended up being a glass blower. And then that wasn't for him eventually, and he arrived in Dublin at the time, and the Easter Rising was on, so he said, I better get out of town. So we headed north, and that's why the family sort of ended up in the north coast, which is to us it's a beautiful part of the world. So, and I'm glad that my grandfather started off with a shop in Portstewart, which is the town next to us, and then the family business really grew into the surround. It's like a triangle area where we are.
So was your great uncle and your grandfather, they were brothers?
No.
No, Angelo was a nephew of my great uncle.
Okay.
So Peter Morelli, who started the business, didn't have any family of his own. So his nephew, Angelo, our grandfather, came from Italy to help him, basically.
Okay. Okay. And at what point did you go into the business, Arnaldo?
Well, the background of our business before I came into it was very much a retail business. So we never really had a wholesale business. We made ice cream just for our own shops. So I had the sort of idea of branching out and supplying other outlets with our ice cream. So I went to Cardiff to go to uni, and didn't want to be in the family business. Retail wasn't for me.
You were probably working in it during the summer.
Yeah, during the summer. I think when we were younger, we were sent to Italy because we were a nuisance to our parents. Because the summertime is such a busy time, the North Coast is a very seasonal. So we were sent to Italy. Then when we were old enough, it was you're working in the shop now for the summer. But it was a great grounding, and we all enjoyed working in the shop in the summertime. But it gave me not a sickener, but I didn't want to make a career in retail. So I decided to do the wholesale, and that's how the business is today, basically.
And we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but I want to come to you, Eamonn, because although you're only making cheese since the 1980s, your history and your family history goes back much further than that from a farming perspective.
Well, it does, yeah. I suppose it goes back. My father and mother came into Knockanore. My father came into Knockanore into an estate. It was originally a large estate called Headborough Estate that was owned by the Maxwell family. And he came in working, or came in to manage the cattle on the estate. His background was he was a cattle dealer. So he needed a base, basically. And he came to an arrangement with the Maxwell family that he could live in the courtyard, look after the cattle on the estate, and pretty much do his own thing as well, which was buy and sell cattle throughout the country. And I remember back when I was sort of 4 or 5 years of age, getting up in the morning early and going to the fairs. Not too many people in this room probably remember the fairs where you bought and sold cattle, and going with him. So people often ask me, where did you get the whole thing of wheeling and dealing with the supermarkets? And so my first educator was my father at the fairs, because he used to have a lot of simple theories that would appear simple at the time, but one of them was like, and I still use it today. You have to leave something. He'd be buying and selling. I'd often ask him why he didn't charge more, or ask the guy more for bullocks or whatever he was selling. He'd say, young fella, you must always leave something in it for the next fella. And it's something that I've carried right through my life, dealing with supermarkets and dealing with distributors, that if you don't leave something in it for the next person, or for the person that's selling it, if they can't make something out of it, they're not going to be there till eventually, and everybody goes out of business. So that was my briefly an education and marketing.
Well, I'd say there's some people here might say that the supermarkets haven't got that message yet.
And we're still, and yes, that's a battle that's ongoing. But I think it's funny the way the whole thing is turning to an extent, because food is going to become, I think, going forward, food is going to be an issue worldwide, because I think with the restrictions, and certainly in this country, and indeed in Europe, with these restrictions that there are with nitrates, and with the way we need to protect the world.
But let me ask you then
sorry,
about your you're grand, about your relationship with your father and working with him then, and then coming in to say, look, I think there's an opportunity to add value here to the milk and make cheese. What was your father's reaction to that?
At the start, he thought it was crazy, of course, because there was nobody we started making cheese officially in 1987, and with the exception of Malines and I met the Cashel Blue people. They'd started a year or two before that. Cheese, I don't know about ice cream, but cheese certainly didn't have a deep-rooted history. And it started in the 80s, and maybe the very late 70s. So I came in very early on, and I remember going to the first cheesemakers meeting. And I'm just going to tell you a very funny story. I remember going to the first cheesemakers meeting in Moore Park in Fermoy. And when I went to the desk, I said, I want to see what the cheesemakers are. Where are the cheesemakers meeting here today? Because I'd been invited. And they said, it's down there, the first door on the right. And I went down and I saw all these people in a room. And they had cardigans and sandals and check shirts and whatever. And I said, no, that's not there, surely. And so I went back up to the reception. And she said, no, that's them. So I don't know.
That was their branding.
That was the brand. Yeah, exactly.
He's lost the sandals.
So I've managed to lose the sandals, and sometimes I still wear the cardigan. But so from that perspective, it was different. They were different. And in fairness to who I tribute the original of the species when it comes to cheesemakers, Latimer and poor Veronica Steele, who is unfortunately no longer with us, and Norman. They, to me, were the original, and I see Sarah down there from Doris, and her ma'am. They were the original of the species, as far as I'm concerned, when it came to actually making cheese. And I remember, before you asked me, that was one of the reasons I got into cheese, because I'd seen them on a television programme down in West Cork, and they were two people who had left Dublin, and they were both lecturers in Trinity, and decided to come down to West Cork and start milking cows and making a bit of cheese on the side of the mountain. And I remember thinking to myself in the mid-80s, I remember thinking to myself, if they can do that there, what can we do over with Goodland in Waterford, you know?
And let's ask your son now, Edward, because Edward, you went off and did accountancy. You're a chartered accountant, which a lot of people might think is an easier lifestyle than getting up to milk cows and make cheese on a daily basis. So tell us first of all why you decided to go off and do accountancy, and what point in your career you decided I'm coming back to the family business.
There probably wasn't one moment, we'll say, but it was always kind of in the back of my mind, I suppose, similar to the guy's story here. Myself, I'm one of 5. I have 4 sisters, and all of us, when we were younger, during the summer, Christmas time, whatever, like we were always in the cheese factory or, you know, doing something. So that was always kind of there. I kind of had an interest in numbers or finance or accounting in school. Did finance in UCC then. I kind of wanted to go and get kind of an education. Well, an education is probably a wrong way, but I wanted to, I suppose, see what's out there first. And kind of over the course of the 5 or 6 years after that, when I did my chartered accountant's exams, I kind of, I suppose, put a pause and said, what? Because I was either going to go one direction, either come home, or go a completely different direction. And I suppose there was a few different things, like you mentioned the lifestyle there. Like the lifestyle that kind of suits me now and going forward is that probably country lifestyle anyway. Myself and my wife, like, so it was kind of, and I still had like where we're from in Knockanore, still have, I suppose, a big attachment to the area. A lot of my friends are still there. I'm involved locally in different things, so that probably played a part. And then, like the business and the farm in itself, like from the outside looking in, it seems a bit crazy to work there, but like I suppose it means a bit more. You're a bit more invested in it. It's not just a normal job. Now that means like some days you're not working a 9 to 5. You could be working 6 to 6 or whatever. But then there's other days you have a bit of flexibility if something's on in your personal life to maybe pull back a bit and all that kind of stuff. So it's probably that kind of balance itself that drew me back, and I suppose working for yourself and the family business.
And do you have specific roles then? Like do you have a specific role in the business, that there's a certain area that you look after? For example, the accounts and the bookkeeping and the numbers.
I suppose we do and we don't. Like I'm 2.5 years back there now, and the first year was both of us kind of learning to work with each other. Finding, like in a good way, finding what we're good at, what we need to improve on, stuff like that. So we probably spent the second year sitting down, the two of us, and we had help from, I suppose, advisors, and IFAC are good advisors to us in terms of like how do we divide up the roles and responsibilities a bit. Now, and the two guys will probably attest to this, in a family business it's not like I'm in charge of this. You know, it can't be black and white, but we've tried to make it a bit black and white. So there's certain things that I'll be responsible for, there's certain things that Eamonn's responsible for, but there's a huge amount of overlap. So that's where kind of regular meetings and conversations, like we're together pretty much every day. So like there's kind of, I suppose, official meetings, and there's conversations, and there's a lot of communication involved, and that can be one of the challenges, because at the start, like from probably from Eamonn's perspective, if I was working for myself for 20 odd years or whatever, and all of a sudden now I kind of have to change the way I'm working, so like that was probably a hurdle, we'll say, but it just takes time.
And Arnaldo, do you have a certain structure within your business where you have those regular meetings and you have an agenda and you take minutes? Like, is that something that you feel you have to do because it's important to do it, or is it more organic?
I think, again, like the guys here, we're trying to improve in that area, and I think communication is the key. But in a seasonal business like ours, it's very, very difficult to set time aside for meetings, especially in the summertime. So I think whenever things are calm and slower in the autumn and the winter, and so you can have set times for meetings. So, you know, we're going to have a meeting every Monday at such and such a time. But again, when the summer kicks in and the madness kicks in for us, it just goes by and I think that's when the difficulty set in, because you're not communicating as much. And
Well, you maybe are, but in a different way.
well, yes. But I think in the winter time, I think things run smoother because the communication is more effective. But in the summertime, you're busy just in the day to day, and things can just fall by the wayside. So I think we have to improve in that area. But it's like there's 4 of us working, so there's 4 siblings in our business. There's 20 staff in total. So the 4 of us we're quite good in that we do have defined roles. And I think as long as everybody knows their responsibilities, what they have to do, and that certainly helps. But we have our moments, like every other family. So.
Go on, Marino. Tell us about one of those moments. There's one just there in the forefront of your mind.
Well, that's why one of our sisters isn't here today. Then you don't need to say anymore. No, as the brother explained, the summer is hectic, and the hotter the weather, the narkier you become. Because it is really full on. But luckily this year it was more steady because the weather wasn't so good. And as I say, communication has to be improved with us. It's sort of, at the first meeting you have after the season, it's like everybody bang in there with what's happened over the such and such. But we do work well. We have a laugh as well in the meetings, which is good. And we just try and work things out between us all. Really.
I think it's good for small businesses to try and put structures in, even if there's only 1 or 2 in the business at the moment, because it's easier then to maintain them as the business grows. Would you agree with that?
I would certainly agree with the communication bit. I couldn't emphasise that enough, and maybe to seek outside help. Like Edward,
mediators.
Like mediators. I would say definitely IFAC. I'm not plugging for IFAC here, but it can be any accountancy firm, but or it can be any advisory. But I think definitely seek a bit of advice. And for me personally, I suppose the fact that I was there for so long on my own. Defining roles was tricky, and I was just so used to making decisions.
And do you find it hard to let it go and to listen to what Edward has to say?
It's getting easier.
Okay.
It's getting easier, and I suppose he brings a skill set that is different, and that I a lot of the time I do look up to in a way. Particularly the whole accountancy side, and that's invaluable. And it's not because he's here beside me and I'm trying to butter him up, but that's the reality of the situation, So he brought great structure, and he had great ideas, of course, about defining roles at the start. And sure, look, we've had several meetings about defining roles, and we're still having those meetings. And it's not easy. It's not easy. But I suppose from my perspective, one of the good things I was able to do was I was able to dump stuff that I didn't like doing in the past, which was like hiring and firing people.
Okay.
I was able to say, well, look, you take on HR. So now I ask him what's he doing if there's a problem, if we're short staff. I can go and ask Edward, what are we doing about this,
And good to have somebody else to talk things through.
Absolutely.
I'm sure
Absolutely,
the Morellis would say that as well.
Yeah, so from that perspective, I don't want to be selfish about it, but we certainly can do. You can dump stuff that you don't need when you have somebody to share it with as well.
Arnaldo, you said you do have a mediator, you have an external person that comes in.
We do, and I think we found that whenever my dad was around, Dad passed away in 2016, so whenever he was around, it was a lot easier in that he was a bit of a referee and didn't take sides as such, and he was a good person to go to if you did have issues or problems, you could talk them through. So whenever we lost that, I think it's a good idea for the business to maybe try and replace that. So we, it makes us sound like a big corporate company, but we have basically a chairman who comes along to 2 board meetings a year and just, he sits there and he asks us questions that maybe the family wouldn't ask each other. And I think that's been a benefit to the business in that, he's very fair. As I said, he won't take sides. And he's, so we tried to replace that, and I think that's been a benefit as well. And it's only twice a year, but it does help. So just when you lose that generation and, suddenly you've got 4 siblings in the same generation working together, I think it's a good idea to have somebody who you can look up to, who's maybe, unbiased and can look at it, from a sort of a more fair viewpoint. So that was a good idea for us.
And the impact then, Marino, of your father dying whenever you're working with a parent, and I'm sure many people in the room here today have, it's awful to lose a parent, whether you work with them or not. But if you're getting up every day and you're going into a work environment that's not associated with that parent, it might be a lot easier than having to get up every day and go into a workplace where your father's not there. What was the impact of that like on you and the business?
Well, I think my father really, towards the end of his life, he wouldn't be up in the factory so much, but he loved coming into work, and we would all chat together and stuff about where we're going, and his dedication, I think, taught us to the fight to make the business bigger. But obviously, as Arnaldo said, it was hard when he left, because then the bickering starts. But
even coming here to Dingle, like your father,
he loved coming here
with him, and he had a special chair down here in the Bloss office. And whenever I was thinking about this talk and chatting to you, like, to win the Supreme Champion Award last year, it must have been bittersweet.
It was very much so, because I think the first year we ever came down to Dingle, we were just made feel so welcome. And to me, this is a family, and it's a 6.5 hour drive for us. But we don't, we do it every year because it's such a special couple of days, and we do have the memories of Dad coming down. And so to win Supreme Champion last year, that brought back. So he would have been delighted about that. So it was nice. So.
And just to highlight then about the Bloss community, because Artie was talking about that yesterday, and a number of the speakers were talking about it also, that if you are working in a family business, it can, and it's just you and one other person, it can feel quite isolating. But to be rest assured that there is this whole community here that are here to support and help you. And I'm sure if you ever got a phone call from somebody who had been down in Dingle and might have met you and they wanted to pick your brains about something, you'd be more than happy to support them on that. And you've mentioned a couple of agencies there. If you need funding for different things, to make sure you pick up the phone and ask your local enterprise office, or go to Invest Northern Ireland. And if they can't help you, to ask them, well, do you know somebody that might be able to help us? But I think this is a great opportunity to really emphasise about the community. And, Artie talks all the time about the Bloss family, and myself and Vivian, who's managing this space, Annie Dunn, all the other mentors. We do really feel like we are part of the Bloss family, and it's really special to be part of that. So if there's anybody here in Dingle for the first time, I hope you are feeling as welcome as the Morellis did the first year that they came, because that is really important to Artie and Fallon and everybody involved in the Bloss community. Let's talk about succession planning then, Eamonn. Is that something that's on your radar? Is it something that you're quite proactive about? Because you have, is it 5 children you have?
5, yeah.
A mix of boys and girls. And, I'm married to a man who, he's not farming full-time. I'd say I'd love to be farming full-time if there was more money in it. But whenever it comes to that land, there's such an affinity with the land, and you're nearly like the custodian of the land. Of course, like I keep saying, if I get my hands on any of the land, there'll be a big for sale sign up. And I feel no affinity to the land.
Yeah.
But you must feel like having that land passed down to you by your father, and you're building on the business, that, in terms of legacy and succession planning, is that something that you proactively engage in?
Well, we are going through it actually as we speak, and have been probably for maybe the last year and a half or 2 years. I mean, Edward was in for a year first, and then we had to look at it very seriously because I wanted him. One of the things about when one of your family, like we have 5, and it was there for anybody that wanted it to an extent, but I suppose Edward kind of put his hand up first for it, to come back and to get involved in the business. But if any one of the girls, and there's one of them here with us today, always here with me today as well, and that opportunity is still there for anyone to get involved. I suppose it's about making the pie big enough that there is enough for everybody, or that the pie is big enough. And that was always something that I was conscious of immediately, to make the pie big enough for 2 at least. Anyway, and then if there was more that it needed, that there was going to be more opportunity. And that's the one thing about food. And anyway, I presume most of the people here are involved in food, is that you can branch out into all sorts of directions with food. So there's no reason why it can't be more than one in the succession. For the moment, it's Edward. But I haven't. The door is not closed, and it's not closed even when I'm gone. In the sense, if they want to come back in, I'd be hoping Edward would be open to because there can be opportunities outside of it. I think, and I look at the 2 lads here, and in all really, because it's great that you can have 4 involved in a business, and be still talking. First of all, and that it's working. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't working, lads. I know that, like, same with Edward and myself. Of course we have bust-ups, and of course we have arguments, but at the end of the day, you've got to get on with it and do it, especially when there's only 2 or 3 or 4 involved. So it's important to be able to do that, and that it doesn't end up in a deep divide. And unfortunately, when a lot of people do get involved, and I've seen businesses in my own county and outside of my own county, where there's too many people, as I say, pulling out of the pot, and there isn't enough in the pot.
Yeah.
Then you can have a problem. So you just need to be careful. And one of the things I was careful of prior to knowing that Edward always said he was coming home, but he never said when. Even though he's here beside me now, he never actually said when. But I think it was important that he go and do what he did, and he was talking about that there. And it's.
I think it's about choice, isn't it? It's good to have the choice,
absolutely.
Not to feel that you have to come into the business.
And that's the one thing I would say is never. It shouldn't be a situation where somebody's obliged to come. And I mean, they call it nowadays finding themselves. You know, the people go away to find themselves. I never got a chance to find myself. I'm still trying to find myself. But and it's a lovely term. But the reality of the situation, I think it's very, very important. I'd say to anyone in the room that have somebody coming in, that they get that opportunity to go away and see what else is out there before they come back. And hopefully when they come back, then they're well ready to come back. And Edward didn't come back till he was, he's 18.
We're nearly out of time, so I hope there's a couple of questions. I'll open the floor just in a minute. But before I do that, I just want to ask you, Arnaldo and Marino, do you feel huge pressure to keep the Morelli brand going? Is the new generation starting to show an interest in it?
Yeah, I think, like you guys, the land is your legacy, and I think our family name and the ice cream business is our legacy. So I think we feel like custodians as well. So selling for gazillions isn't an option for us, Sharon. We're looking for somebody else, the next generation to come along.
Would it not be quite tempting if somebody did come in and they were offering you a big price ticket? Is that something that you have ever discussed? Or maybe you have been offered it already and you did turn it down?
Unfortunately not. We haven't been offered. If anyone wants to make any offers, we're open to offers. No, I think it's, the business has evolved so much over 100 years. So I think for the generation to decide that we want to dispose of it and sell it to somebody, I think I'd have to skip the country. I couldn't. I don't think I could live with myself. But the next Marino's son Dario is in the business now. He's involved in production. He's down in the corner, probably hiding. But I think it's great that now there's a 5th generation coming into the family business, and he's showing an interest and the first year he came down to Dingle, we won Supreme Champion, so maybe he's a lucky,
You brought
maybe he's a lucky mascot for us.
Fantastic. Any questions? Vivian has the microphone there if anybody would like to put a question to the panel. No questions?
We're let off lightly.
You're let off lightly. Well, listen, Marino, Eduardo.
Sorry.
Eduardo.
We have a question?
Oh, sorry, do we? Apologies.
Oh. Oh, Italian.
And just tell us who you are before you ask your question.
Yeah, Helen G here from G's Gourmet Jams and Leaks. I'm just wondering, we have three in family, and the three were involved in the business. But there's two kind of in production. Well, one is in quality and one is in production, and the other lad is sales. And the sales fella always seems to get the lighter job. You go off and you don't work at all. And there's that element of he's not working. And how do you address that going forward?
So from a sales perspective, like sales, I think is very much a vocation. Sales does not come naturally to everybody. So, it's not the easiest job in the world. Would you like to take that one?
Yeah,
Eamonn,
I can try.
Edward?
I don't know. A lot of that is down to perception. Like, so if I'm no, but it is like if I'm working in the production side of a factory, it's real physical hard work. It's the same as like someone milking cows or working on the farm, and then they're looking at this person driving around in a car, having a few conversations. They have a handy number, whereas if they swap places for a day, I'd say their perspective would probably change. So I can understand both sides of the argument. It's a hard one. It's a hard one to bridge the gap because, like, I've done sales. Like, sales wouldn't be my background at all, and I wouldn't say I'm particularly good at it. But I've had to do it for the last years, and it is a very, very tough gig in itself. Like, just trying to.
And it's pressure.
It's pressure, but you have to get used to being ignored and said no to and stuff like that. So it's not an easy job either. And so I suppose it's the difference between a physical job and a tough kind of mental job. But I don't know how to bridge the gap. To be honest, that's always going to be there.
Sounds like you need to bring a third party in.
Tell them swap places for a day. That's what I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, I think...
And maybe that's an advantage to a family business, that you can possibly, in a family business, you have more opportunity to shove that person into every role for a short time and let them, that could be...
True.
That could be seen as a positive of the...
Yeah, now starting a business is way tougher, so you'd be in a better position to this, but like some days you could be a salesman, some days you're milking cows, and some days you could have 5 different jobs or roles in a week. Like,
yeah, I think when you start a business, you have to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. And I know it's an easy one to say, something like that, but that's where I was. That's where I was when I started in 1987, because I couldn't afford the likes of an accountant, but we had to get to a point, or to have somebody come in, we had to get to that point where, build a business to a point where, and this is something that a lot of small businesses kind of plod away in their own, and then they think the next generation is going to come and just sit in there happy to continue your passion. And because that's what it is, when you start something like, the same with the ice cream, I'm sure it was a passion for the person that started that originally. And that's where it starts off as a passion, and then suddenly it goes from a passion to, we need to make money here and we need to make a living. And then you look at the next generation coming in and you say, well, look, they're out there doing whatever. So it becomes, for Edward now, it's a kind of a combination of continuing my passion but also making a decent living out of it. And I suppose the onus on me was, and I'm not just saying this is to build that business to a point where it's worth his while coming in, besides the passion and besides the legacy that we're talking about here. Because it is legacy initially. It's the legacy, it's continuing on the family tradition, it's all of that, of course. But it's also about having it at a level that's going to give him a quality of life. I mean, my mother and father started milking cows by hand. Then we got a milking machine, we thought, to milk the cows, and we thought, Jesus, this can't get any better. And then we suddenly had a milking parlour. And it's important to leave it better than where
Absolutely. Yeah.
than where you started, you know. It's also important not to forget. While it's important not to forget the people who started milking cows. Starting with, in my case, my mother and father started with 4 Kerry cows. Now there's 160 cows there, you know. But it's important not to forget that. But it's also important that you get out of that situation and you bring it to the next level. Whatever business you're in, whether it's ice cream or it's cheese, or as in your case, in jam. And I know this lady for many, many years. As I know more, you know, as most people probably know me for years, because we're around a while, and it's a small enough community. And I think there is help, just to say that there is help. And I'm happy to talk to anybody that wants to talk to me about inheritance or succession, because we're going through that. So, and we're still working our way through it. So there's no issue with that. And so it is a lovely community. And it's a fantastic community to come down here. And I can't say enough of good things about it.
Well, thank you. And thanks to my panel, I'll get the names right now. Eamonn,
Yes.
Edward, Arnaldo and Marino. Thanks so much for being guests today. Big round of applause.
Thanks.